All right. Good afternoon. My name is Lindsay Clark. I'm the Senior Regional Field Organizer for the Human Rights Campaign, and I've been working with our local and state partners here on the ground throughout this session. Today we're joined by child welfare advocates and local business leaders to discuss a dangerous proposal that would license discrimination in Kansas. After all the speakers have had their chance to speak, we will be available for questions. And first, I'd like to bring up Chad Griffin, who's the president of the Human Rights Campaign. Chad.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, and thank you all for being here today. I want to start out by just acknowledging the incredible partners that are standing up here unified today in not just a bipartisan but a nonpartisan coalition against this hateful bill. First, I just want to acknowledge Equality Kansas and Thomas Witt, their fearless leader and executive director, who has been working nonstop on the ground for years, for more than a decade on these issues, and we are grateful for your leadership and for your partnership. I also want to acknowledge Micah Kubik, the executive director of the ACLU of Kansas, Lori Ross, the president and CEO of Foster Adopt Connect, Aubrey Thompson, who's joining us today to share their personal story, as well as Jenny Torrance and other business leaders who have been standing up and speaking out. It's a true honor to stand with each of you here today. On behalf of the Human Rights Campaign and our more than 3 million members and supporters, including thousands across this state, we are here today to stand up for fairness and for equality for all Kansans. At this very moment, there is a bill rooted in nothing more than discrimination and bigotry working its way through the state legislature. HB 2481 would, with animus, grant a license to discriminate to child welfare organizations that are providing services paid for with taxpayer dollars. If this bill were to become law, qualified Kansans, including those who are LGBTQ, could unconscionably be turned away from caring for a child in need. HB 2481 is wrong, it's hateful, and it's cruel. And it does nothing more than harm kids in need and discriminate against loving families who want to open their hearts and their homes. We should be making it easier, not harder, for children to find loving homes, and limiting the pool of qualified parents for discriminatory reasons harms the very children these agencies are funded to protect. As other red and blue states alike reject similar anti-LGBTQ bills and seek to make progress, this harmful and hateful legislation would take Kansas in the opposite direction. It would also send a resounding and damaging message to business leaders and companies around the country that this state, that Kansas is openly hostile to their LGBTQ workers, their families, and their customers. And as we've seen in North Carolina, passage of such a hateful law that intentionally and directly discriminates could be catastrophic for this state's economy and this state's reputation. It's this government's responsibility to serve everyone. And any state contractor who thinks they're unable to serve the public should not receive a single taxpayer dollar. With thousands of Kansas children in need of loving homes, we urge all fair-minded voters, businesses, and community leaders alike to join us in urging lawmakers to reject this hateful and discriminatory bill and stand up to defend the rights of all Kansas families. Thank you very much.
All right, next up we're going to bring up Tom Witt, who is the Executive Director of Equality Kansas. Tom?
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Chad. Good afternoon. I'm Tom Witt. I'm Executive Director for Equality Kansas. You've heard about the religious freedom bills around the country. What a lot of people don't realize is our legislature here in Kansas invented this type of religious freedom bill in 2011 in response to our organization working in cities and school districts to add sexual orientation and gender identity to local ordinances and policies. What they tried to do was undermine the ability of these municipalities and school districts to enforce their own local non-discrimination ordinances, and it was specifically targeted at the LGBT community in this state. Every year, with the exception of maybe one, we have had to fight one of these so-called religious freedom bills, and they are all targeted at allowing government officials and people in business that serve the public to deny service to LGBT Kansans and have that written into law here in this state. This is just the latest round for us, and it's getting pretty old. Now, we have tried to compromise in the past. Notably in 2013, we compromised on a religious freedom bill that took out some of the most destructive language. And that was supposed to put an end to this. But here we are again with yet another so-called religious freedom bill, which is meant to do nothing but demean and diminish the rights of LGBT families and to treat us as second-class citizens and to tell us we're going to take your tax dollars and we're going to turn it over to these agencies who provide a state service so that they can tell you and your families you're not good enough. We reject that as any decent person should reject that. And we urge the legislature to remove the discriminatory language from this bill or just kill this bill altogether. We have made compromise offers on language on this bill. The other side has yet to accept a compromise. All they can think about is enforcing their own brand of discrimination, and we say enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Next up, we're going to bring up Lori Ross, who's the president of Foster Adopt Connect. Lori?
Thank you. I could spend some time talking to you as a foster and adoptive parent, but I think what I'll do is talk to you as the director of an organization that does everything in our power to work with and support children in foster care who have suffered tremendously as a result of abuse or neglect in their homes. What I can tell you is that not only does this bill discriminate against adults who identify as LGBTQ, but what this bill actually does is it creates abuse for children who are in the foster care system. One of the things that we know about children in foster care is that they are overrepresented in the foster care system. They have a higher average number of foster care placements, a higher likelihood of living in a group home setting. They are more than twice as likely as their non-LGBTQ peers to report being treated poorly by the foster care system. 78% of LGBTQ youth were removed or ran away from their foster care placements as a result of hostility toward their sexual orientation or gender identity. And 100% of LGBTQ identified youth in group homes reported verbal harassment. 70% also experienced physical violence in group homes. 40% of homeless children identify as LGBTQ. What do you think might be more heinous than discriminating against families? I think it's refraining from discriminating. I think what's more important is the fact that this bill will discriminate against the very children that DCF is charged with protecting. In foster care, these children suffer tremendously. I personally had the experience of sitting next to the bedside of a young man who at the age of 11, struggling with gender identity, committed suicide by hanging in his foster home. While the police were interviewing his foster family, he had no one to sit next to him in that hospital emergency room where his body lay. From that moment on, I have become a passionate advocate for the needs of the children in the foster care system. And this system cannot afford to discriminate against loving, qualified families who can support, welcome, and affirm all children into their homes. LGBTQ parents have been proven to be effective parents for all children, whether they identify as members of that community or not. the children that are raised in LGBTQ homes have been proven again and again scientifically to do just as well as children raised by heterosexual married couples, and religion has nothing to do with it. I heard the DCF director get up and testify in support of this proposition, saying that by increasing the number of Christian organizations which can come into this state and provide foster care, we will somehow end up with more families for children. There is no study anywhere that suggests that more agencies equates to more families. What we actually need is more families, and we need families who are willing to do what it takes to learn how to meet the needs of all of the children in our foster care system. I will do everything from now until the time I die to fight for the rights of children to grow up in loving, safe, forever families. And all families, all qualified, skilled, loving families should be allowed to be foster and adoptive parents to Kansas children.
Thanks, Lori. Next up, we have Aubrey Thompson, who is former foster youth. Aubrey?
First and foremost, I wanted to thank each of you for coming here today and listening to some of the voices who stand in for those who will be impacted by this bill. I was a foster child. I was a foster child in the state of Kansas from 2010 to 2014. I was in 21 placements of all varieties, which allowed me to be impacted by youth from so many different walks of life. I'm not here to bash the system. I know it's doing the best it can, but we are still failing these kids. Children are spending weekends in placement agency offices and overcrowded group homes, and children who have committed no criminal offenses are sleeping in lockdown facilities because it's the only place for them to rest their heads. In what is already a dehumanizing experience, where there simply isn't enough resources for each kid to get the love and support that they need, there is just no way we can allow this plainly discriminatory piece of legislation to pass. Not only will loving and suitable homes, both permanent and temporary, be cast aside, but kids who already feel alone, misunderstood, and isolated will be forced to suffer further. I have personally witnessed trans young adults assaulted. I have heard gay young men verbally torn apart, all because they were forced to choose between silencing themselves or having a home. It is simply sickening, and we must not stand for it. This nation has come so far in the name of equality, and these kids need us to fight for them. We can't turn back now. To every LGBT couple opening their hearts and homes to these children, we applaud your selflessness, and the world needs more people like you. And to any LGBT youth who feels alone and lost in the system, know that you are loved, valued, and important. Never forget that. Thank you.
Thanks, Aubrey. Next, we're going to have Jenny Torrance, who is a small business owner here in Topeka. Jenny?
Yep. She's a hard one to follow after that one. I am Jenny Torrance, and I am a lifelong Kansan, and I am a lifelong Topekan, and I am extremely proud of my state, except for when things like this come about. I am a taxpayer. I support my community in every which way I can, from opening 3 businesses in this local community, and really doing what I can to bring people to our state, whether it is tourism or businesses, different things. And I have to say, it is so disheartening and discouraging to think, as a taxpayer of Kansas, that we are creating legislation that discriminates. And so I really encourage people to think about it as a broad picture, not even from of the other heartstrings that we're looking at, but from a business point of view and from a state of, we really want to welcome all, and all should be welcome in our state. So thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Next up, we're going to have Micah Kubik, who's the ACLU of Kansas's Executive Director. Micah?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very proud to stand here today with my friend Tom Witt and our friends at Equality Kansas and the Human Rights Campaign and Foster Adopt Connect. But I'm also very, very sorry and regretful that we have to stand here today. It is a shame that we have to once again rally ourselves to oppose a hateful and discriminatory bill in the state of Kansas. You know, the fundamental question today is whether the Constitution belongs to all of us or only to some of us. Whether the values of the Constitution of freedom and equality and justice belong to all of us or only to some of us. And whether the state of Kansas, whether the government of Kansas works for all of us or only some of us. In fact, the question is whether we believe that love belongs to all of us or only to some of us. I find it remarkable that some of the proponents of this hateful, discriminatory bill say that they do so in the name of religious freedom, and usually in the name of a very particular religion, one whose scripture reads, "Love never fails." And yet, too many of these folks seem to believe that when it comes to a particular type of person, love can indeed fail. I reject that notion wholeheartedly. All of us at the ACLU of Kansas, the tens of thousands of people who are represented by the folks here today, we reject that notion. We believe the Constitution is for everyone. We believe that love is for everyone, and we believe that love wins in the end. You know, Tom mentioned before that we've been here before. I thought that when there was a change in the gubernatorial administration in this state, that we might never again have to fight divisive policies that are intended to divide Kansans from one another, to provide a license to discriminate. But it seems that everything old is new again, and the spirit of that administration still lingers in the building. I say that we want to reject that once and for all. We want to say Kansas is a place that is truly the free state, not just an idea, but something that we live every day in every way. And the way we can do that is by rejecting wholeheartedly this hateful, discriminatory bill that does nothing but provide people with a license to discriminate on the taxpayer's dime. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. We have time for a couple of questions for our speakers. If you could direct a question to a particular person, otherwise we can grab speakers one-on-one for individual interviews if that's easier.
Micah, if this bill were to become law, can we assume the ACLU would challenge it?
So you should always assume that the ACLU will use every option that it has at its disposal. I never say ahead of time what we are going to do, but folks in this state know the tools that we have at our disposal. They know our record, they know the things that we stand for, and they know the responses that we initiate when we see something that we think is illegal and unconstitutional, and they should draw their own conclusions about what might happen.
Question for Tom Wentz. You said that there's an attempt to compromise. How do you compromise on discrimination?
Well, the central issue in this bill is funding, is taking taxpayer money, using it to provide a state service, but giving it to private agencies that will then turn away state residents. And we want that language removed.
So if they were going to discriminate, don't have taxpayer money.
If they, in the privacy of their agencies and churches, if they want to engage in discriminatory behavior, that's between them and God. Right now, what they're trying to do is between them and the rest of us taxpayers. And that's the language we want struck.
Tom, obviously the House rejected kind of an attempt to pass this earlier a few weeks ago. What's your confidence level about how a new vote would go now? And do you guys believe that someone will try to force a vote in the next 8 days?
Well, Jonathan, you know me, and you know I'm pretty plain spoken on these issues. I'll continue in that tradition. Right now, neither side has a solid whip count. Nobody knows how many votes there are one way or another on this. If they knew, they would run their motion to concur, and we wouldn't be standing here right now. Well, we might be standing here, but there would be a lot more anger. But right now, nobody knows which way the votes are going to go on this.
Do you have concerns about the timing of this bill with the foster care contracts coming open pretty shortly? The timing of the bill, it runs on the legislature's schedule, such as it is. I don't think there's any actual direct relationship between when this bill was introduced and where it is in the process and the fact that contracts are coming up for renewal. I know the child placement agencies may be concerned about that, but I don't see a direct connection.
Secretary Meyer did say last week, I think, that the new contracts for the administrators will have a non-discrimination clause in them. So is your concern about the subcontractors?
Well, our concern is any agency that is given taxpayer money to provide state services, whether that's a prime contractor or a subcontractor or somebody who's out paving the turnpike. Look, people talk about, oh, well, this is about families. That's right, it is about families, but it's also about serving taxpayers. Let's just say that the headlines you guys walk out of here to write is, Kansas Turnpike Authority bans LGBT drivers. And the sub-lead is paving company asserts religious freedom in construction of new roadway. Okay? They're taking taxpayer dollars to provide a taxpayer service through a private contractor, but they want to deny a certain group of people access to that state-provided service. Whether it's the turnpike or adoption and foster services, it's one principle, and this is not something we should be putting in state law.
Great. If there are no further questions, I think our speakers are available for individual one-on-one for a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Develop that over there.